Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, when she addressed Congress months ago, she informed Congress that Iran was nowhere near having a nuclear weapon. And I think her information was accurate. And that also goes along with other nuclear regulatory agencies. They said the same thing. But here we are in a war with the president, of course, saying Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. No, we do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. But that goes completely against what former DNI Tulsi Gabbard had said and the other nuclear regulatory agencies. But this is something Americans have gotten used to, is basically what we view as propaganda that comes from Washington that leads our military off into some war in a foreign country. And too many of us have friends and family members that are veterans that have to live with PTSD and other horrific injuries. And we never want to see American flag draped coffins coming home from a foreign country that many of us can't find on a map and have never been to. And what we want is we want a strong economy. We want a Washington, D.C. that's focused on Americans, not on how much money they can make on insider trading, on oil prices that go up and down, government contracts for friends and family members, and ignoring the real problems like Social Security that will be bankrupt in 2032. So it's just gotten to the point, sadly, where many Americans are just tuning out because they're sick and tired of what they perceive as just more lies and empty promises.
And again, she reminded everybody that the reason that Donald Trump went after her is that she called out the Trump administration for not turning over the Epstein files. And she said, I just want to be very clear. It's Donald Trump who doesn't want the Epstein files out. She goes, I'm as close to the guy as can be. Okay. I was as close to him. He's the one who doesn't want it out. We can blame Bondi. We can blame Todd Blunt. You could definitely, they're definitely complicit in these crimes, in the pedo cover up. But she goes, it's Donald Trump. Who else would know more than I do? Here's what she said. Let's play this clip.
Pam Bondi, she serves at the pleasure of the president and his administration, and those there are telling her, here's who you can prosecute. No, don't do this. I mean, they told her that the Epstein files, that fight to release the Epstein files came directly from President Trump. And I know a lot of people have a hard time with that, but that is the truth. He fought the hardest to stop these files from being released. And the only reason that he stopped
of hotel gyms, he said, maybe someone put a gym in a building somewhere, but no one did it at the scale of my father. He's saying that his father, the father of the hotel gym, is a guy who's never stepped inside one, okay? The amount of ass kissing in this trial is insane. DJ TJ, of course, denies any and all wrongdoing and is instead going with the our accountants did it defense.
I'm not supposed to rely on a big five accounting firm, like one of the biggest accounting firms in the world. I can pay them millions of dollars. I rely on them to do accounting, but I'm supposed to know more than them. By this logic, insurance companies are going to start suing patients for listening to their doctors. Right? Do you understand? Like, am I supposed to know more? Oh, Don Jr. doesn't know anything about it. I'm not an accountant. I'm a business guy.
I'm a business guy who had his elbows soldered together, and now I move my arms like a Muppet all the time. And with all the complaining the Trumps do about this trial playing out in the media, you could barely even turn the channel without seeing their lawyer doing an interview with somebody.
Here is a joke that lands with more precision than almost anything said about this administration all year, because it does something most political comedy doesn't bother doing. It goes straight for the family business, past the man himself, and into the two adult sons who have built their own increasingly public profiles in his shadow. Responding to yet another legal threat from Donald Trump, Jimmy Kimmel looked into the camera and said, "You'd think the guy who fathered Eric and Don Jr. would know how to handle jokes. Usually when he wants somebody to stop talking about him, he pays them $130,000. He wanted me to do it for nothing." 2 sentences, one reference to the Stormy Daniels hush money case. One dig at Trump's 2 eldest sons, delivered not as a cheap shot at their intelligence, but as a pointed observation about inherited litigiousness. The family trait of reaching for lawyers and legal threats instead of engaging with criticism. Welcome to USA Press. Tonight we are tracing the real, fully documented, decade-long war between Jimmy Kimmel and the Trump family. The ballroom jokes, the Melania jabs, the actual FCC license threat that nearly ended his career, and the running thread of Trump Jr. and Eric that weaves through almost all of it. And we're closing with what's happened around Trump in just the past several days, because a war with Iran just took a genuinely alarming new turn while we were putting this together. Let's start with the foundation of this entire feud, because you cannot understand why Kimmel keeps circling back to Trump's sons without understanding the specific joke that started it. Back during the 2024 campaign, when Rolling Stone published a retrospective on the Trump-Kimmel relationship, they traced the $130,000 line directly back to the Stormy Daniels hush money payment. The same payment that would eventually become the basis for Trump's 34 felony convictions in Manhattan. Kimmel's joke works on two levels simultaneously. It's a factual reference to Trump's own documented legal history, and it's a generational observation about how that same instinct. Pay someone off, threaten someone into silence, reach for a lawyer before reaching for an argument.
If it weren't for Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu worked well with me, but he will tell you, we're the ones with the guns, we're the ones with the whole deal, we're the ones with the B-2 bombers, etc. If it weren't for Donald Trump, Israel would have been eviscerated.
Your relationship with Netanyahu
It's good, but we have to keep him a little bit sane.
Are you going to be able to control Israel from attacking Lebanon?
Yeah, I will be. I mean, I wonder. They have a lot of respect for me, and they do as I say.
A few moments later.
Israel's military said Friday its forces struck targets throughout southern Lebanon overnight as Hezbollah reported intense fighting in the area, threatening the nascent agreement between Iran and the United States to end their war.
Donald Trump's Iran deal has been called what he least wants it called, a surrender. And that's not just by Democrats or anti-war activists or foreign policy experts who never trusted him in the first place. It is coming from Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal. They're almost in complete agreement with the New York Times at this point, which is telling. The journal published 2 harsh opinion pieces attacking Trump's Iran agreement, and the criticism is simple. Trump's giving up too much, and Iran is giving up too little. That the United States may be walking away from its own leverage before getting the concessions that Trump once demanded as a means to justify this war.
Well, by far. Who else could have done a blockade like that? I did a naval blockade where not one ship was able to get through. Some tried. They didn't, it didn't last very long.
And it certainly brought Iran to the table more than before. However, beginning a conflict, you had talked about you only wanted unconditional surrender. And the MOU doesn't look like unconditional surrender.
Well, it really probably is unconditional surrender.
It is?
I think so.
The journal raised alarms about the deal's vague language, specifically around the Strait of Hormuz. It questioned whether Iran is really being forced to abandon its long-term objectives. And it warned that the lack of hard nuclear commitments suggests Iran has not meaningfully changed course at all. It casts a hell of a lot of doubt on the negotiating ability of Mr. After the deal, which was echoed by many members of the GOP also.
They're better off than they were before the hostilities began.
There's also a lot of talk about this $300 billion fund that they may soon have access to. Nobody is disputing that that is a thing.
I hate to say this. In this deal, the biggest loser is the United States and India.
You negotiate from strength. You don't give people money.
I will say that the early returns do not look wildly promising at this point.
America has given up all of its leverage in this situation.
Let's be very clear. This is the vice president's deal. It does not have support.
The regime has not changed. They're just richer.
I do have concerns about the memorandum of understanding.
I didn't believe it. I thought somebody was spoofing me.
Unless you were homeschooled by a day drinker, no one's confident that Iran's going to do anything.
How about the guys and gals that bled and died on our country's behalf? Well, where's their fun? I didn't see that in MOU.
This doesn't feel like a victory.
The reconstruction fund, that's what's making the optics here even worse. Reports around the deal have discussed the possibility of a massive reconstruction fund for Iran, with figures as high as $300 billion being debated in conservative media.
This is not the art of the deal. This is the art of surrender. Trump didn't get peace through strength. He got payoff through weakness. Americans got almost nothing we wanted and needed, and Trump gave away the store. The Iranians took him to the cleaners. Look what they're getting.
Appears to have been passed down to the next generation of the Trump family. President Karen demanded to speak to my manager, Kimmel said around the same period, mocking Trump's habit of publicly demanding networks silence hosts who criticize him. That single joke, President Karen, has become something of a recurring shorthand across late-night television for describing exactly this pattern. A man who built an empire on litigation, now occupying the highest office in the country and still reaching for the same playbook. Now, here is where the relationship between Trump and Kimmel gets genuinely complicated, because this was not always a hostile feud. And understanding that history makes the current hostility land with considerably more weight. During Trump's first campaign and into his first term, Kimmel and Trump maintained what Rolling Stone's own retrospective described as a mutually beneficial relationship. Trump appeared on Kimmel's show. Kimmel, like most late-night hosts of that era, treated Trump as a ratings draw rather than an existential political threat. The turn began, according to that same documented timeline, in May of Trump's first term, when Kimmel delivered an emotional, unscripted monologue about his newborn son's heart condition and the surgery required to treat it, using his own family's medical crisis to make an impassioned case for protecting the Affordable Care Act, which Republicans were actively working to repeal at the time. It's worth pausing on that original healthcare monologue a bit longer, because it represents a genuinely different register of criticism than most of what followed. And understanding it helps explain why Kimmel's later material carries the weight it does with his audience. His son Billy was born with a congenital heart defect requiring emergency surgery within days of birth, and Kimmel used his platform not to score a cheap political point, but to walk his audience through what that experience actually costs, medically and financially, for a family without his own resources, making the case, through raw personal testimony rather than talking points, that no parent should have to choose between their child's survival and their family's financial ruin because of a pre-existing condition. That monologue is widely regarded as one of the more genuinely moving moments in the history of the format, precisely because it wasn't built around a joke at all. It matters for understanding everything that came after, because it establishes that Kimmel's opposition to this administration's policies did not begin as reflexive partisan positioning. It began as a direct, personal, deeply felt reaction to policy he believed would concretely harm families like his own, and only hardened into the sharper, more combative comedic material years later as the political environment around him escalated in turn. That monologue, built on raw personal vulnerability rather than political combat, marked the real beginning of Kimmel becoming one of the administration's most consistent critics. Trump's subsequent policies, the DACA repeal, the broader assault on the ACA, only widened the gap. By the time Trump returned to office for a second term, any pretense of a friendly relationship had completely evaporated. Let's talk about the moment that nearly ended Kimmel's career entirely, because it is the single most consequential chapter of this entire saga, and it deserves the full context. It's worth walking through exactly what Kimmel said about Charlie Kirk that triggered the suspension.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is getting her final revenge on Donald Trump. She made a video message that she published directed at Donald Trump, calling him out as a pedo protector, calling him out for getting the United States into an unlawful and catastrophic war with Netanyahu against Iran, where Donald Trump has now surrendered. Let me show you what Marjorie Taylor Greene just posted. She calls Donald Trump out for being a pedo protector in this video message directed at Donald Trump. Let's play it.
Because you only get called a traitor if you go against him on the Epstein files. Because really, they are all totally okay with rapists and pedophiles.
She then mocked Donald Trump for starting what he called a board of peace, only to start unlawful and catastrophic wars with Netanyahu that Donald Trump has now surrendered in. Here, play this clip.
All of this would never be possible without the peace president, whom established the Board of Peace and appointed himself the head of the board without term limits right before he waged the Iran war that is not a war. Now that he is on the verge of securing peace for the 40th time after defeating Iran dozens of times, he must be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. His MAGA influencers will demand it. And of course, special mention must be made for our greatest ally who never wants peace, continues bombing children daily, and is furious that there is now almost a peace deal. Thankfully, their fury at Trump's audacity to almost make peace is being made known to the American people.
I'm not widely known for being a sentimental guy. Anyone who's seen me on social media knows I'm far more likely to crack a joke or get myself in trouble for posting some grossly inappropriate memes than I am to shed a tear. I know this because I've even gotten the call from that guy a couple times.
You know, Don, you're getting a little aggressive on social media, Don. Relax. To say Charlie knew more about the Bible than me is an understatement, folks. It's like saying Donald Trump knows more about being president than Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris. No kidding.
Because the underlying controversy has often been flattened in retelling into something simpler than what actually happened. Kimmel's comments centered on his read of how segments of the MAGA political movement were responding to Kirk's assassination, a genuinely complicated, fraught topic that required care to discuss responsibly on live television. Kimmel later characterized the backlash to his own remarks as, in his words, maliciously mischaracterized, explaining that he believed right-wing media outlets had deliberately distorted what he actually said in order to manufacture outrage, and that his intent in returning to the subject afterward was to correct that distortion rather than walk back his original point. Whatever your read on the underlying substance, the practical consequence was real and severe. Multiple large station owner groups pulled his programming from dozens of markets, and ABC suspended the show entirely for a period, before mounting public pressure and Kimmel's own continued defense of his position led to his reinstatement. In September of 2025, Kimmel was suspended from ABC over comments he made regarding the assassination of Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk. Multiple station groups, including Nexstar and Sinclair, pulled his programming entirely, and ABC suspended the show indefinitely under mounting political pressure. And here is the detail that reveals exactly how personal this fight had become. While Kimmel was suspended, an AI-generated video circulated purporting to be a tribute from Trump himself, praising Kimmel as the funniest talk show host in my book, and saying he couldn't believe ABC would fire him over a joke, before the video's punchline revealed itself by having the AI Trump casually mention that Kimmel's father had recently passed away. Kimmel, upon seeing the fabricated clip during his triumphant return broadcast, played along perfectly. "Wait, hold on! My father passed away? What a way to find out! Dad, did you know this? Are you aware that you're dead?" The camera then panned to Kimmel's actual, very much alive father, James Kimmel, sitting in the studio audience, who deadpanned back, "I'm shocked." It was a moment that perfectly captured Kimmel's entire approach to this fight. Meeting, escalating, sometimes genuinely strange hostility with disarming, absurdist humor rather than matching rage for rage.
Option is there, and that's the big difference between this and JCPOA and the way Obama did it. Obama, they begged Iran for a deal, and we bombed Iran and then put in a blockade and then ran ships through and then have restarted when necessary to ensure that they come to the table for a great deal. So our military posture will be whatever it needs to be to ensure they're compelled over this 60 days through the memorandum of understanding that they live up to what they said they would do. The document says Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, won't seek one, won't buy one, won't have one.
JCPOA said that
days,
too.
There'll be negotiations to make that final. But they didn't have the threat of military force the way that we do, that Iran respects in a very way that their regime is more devastated than it's ever been in its 47 years. And that's why they're at the table. So the huge difference is we did this from a position of strength. President Trump led with military might.
Then you have these MAGA Republican senators trying to spin it, like Deb Fischer of Nebraska. We did this from a position of strength. You think this is a position of strength? That's what's wrong with you, MAGAs. This ain't from a position of strength. I believe America's never looked weaker to the world. I mean, you may want to tell yourself that this looks strong, but if you truly believe that, then you've got a lot of issues. Let's play this clip.
Let's remember, the president's negotiating now from a position of strength. Iran is weak. We have gone in, we've showed the strength of America, and now the president's able to negotiate from a position of strength this time. It's not going in and just acquisition to what the Iranians want.
Then you have MAGA Republican Senator Tim Scott, and he's like, I get it. Gas prices are too high, but we are about to reduce these prices so damn quickly. Because of the deal. What, the deal that's not happening? The deal that you keep on talking about? This will be the 40th time of this? Let's play this clip.
Obviously, gas prices are just too high,
And President Trump is making the right decisions in Iran that will lead to lower gas prices in the very, very near future. So I'm excited about bringing those prices down.
And let's check in quickly. What's going on at the White House right now? Are they treating the White House with dignity and respect, or have they turned it into a literal junkyard circus with lights that are beaming, that are preventing pilots from being able to see in this? I mean, it looks like some dystopian carnival from a zombie movie. And here's what's going on in the White House, everybody. Yeah, here, play this clip. And then you have this, which is just kind of utterly disgusting. This is what's one of the things that's happening in the White House too. A fighter, Josh Hockett, spitting on himself in front of the White House. This is what's taking place in the people's house right now, okay? This is what's going on, supported, endorsed by the Trump regime. Let's play it.
So what? Maybe I was drinking last night. But who wouldn't? Who wouldn't be? I have a giant black man that wants to knock me out. He has the most knockouts in UFC history.
Be still, Josh.
231.
231. The official weight for Josh Hogan. And ladies and gentlemen, if you would please.
And folks, with all of this disinformation out there, with all of these lies from the Trump regime, it's just so important that we have accurate news sources right now. And I often get asked, Ben, what type of sources do you use to make these videos, and how do you kind of research and study to maintain your objectivity? I use Ground News. I partner with Ground News to stay objective in my reporting. It's an app and website that pulls in thousands of articles from around the world and organizes them into how the left is reporting them, how's the right framing it, how's the center framing it. And for every story, they give me a color-coded layout to make it easy to see the political bias of each source. I could also see independent news versus news that's related to corporate interests. And so I can compare different stories and see how they're being reported. Let's give you an example. This morning, this article, Palestinian death toll in Gaza tops 73,000, officials say, as Israeli continues to strike despite the ceasefire, which we should be calling a fake ceasefire. This is being heavily reported on the left and in the center, but it's getting almost quite literally, basically zero coverage on the right. And so they're just not being educated and told what's really happening out there. And there's a cover-up of the genocide that's taking place. And I think that's a big deal. And I want to study how are different people getting their news sources. Ground News has this dedicated blind spot feature. It's a personal favorite of mine, which highlights stories being disproportionately covered on different sides. So I believe in Ground News so much, so I'm going to offer you 40% off the same Vantage plan that I use for my research. Just go click the link in the description or go to ground.news/MTN or scan the QR code up here. It's one of the biggest discounts they've ever offered. If you want to support this channel and get a clearer understanding of the world, try out Ground News. One more time, go to ground.news/MTN or scan the QR code up here. Getting back to my video right now, I want to talk about former President Obama was asked about everything that was going on right now. Here's what Obama had to say. Let's play this clip.
It is doubtful that any agreement that arises is going to be significantly.
It's worth noting one more piece of material from that same post-suspension return stretch, because it shows how far Kimmel was willing to push once he was back on air. He aired a doctored clip of the PBS program Antiques Roadshow, reworked to demand Trump release the Epstein files, ending with the fabricated appraiser telling the president, in blunt and unmistakable terms, to go do something anatomically impossible to himself. That bit, combined with the Tylenol and Brendan Carr material from the same broadcast, tells you that Kimmel's response to nearly losing his show entirely was not caution. It was escalation, delivered with the confidence of a host who had just watched his own audience numbers spike specifically because of the attempt to silence him. When Kimmel returned to air after that suspension, he did not soften his material. If anything, he sharpened it considerably. He mocked a poll showing FCC Chairman Brendan Carr's approval rating at 19%, telling his audience, more people approve of genital rabies than Brendan Carr. He took aim at the administration's war on Tylenol, joking about RFK Jr.'s public health pronouncements with the same mix of disbelief and mockery he'd applied to virtually every other administration policy. And he made a point of publicly thanking the very people trying to silence him for the attention it had generated. Even though we are still being preempted in 60 American cities, on Tuesday, we had our second highest rated show in almost 23 years on the air. Our monologue from Tuesday night has more than 21 million views just on YouTube alone. And I want to say we couldn't have done it without you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. That is not simply a joke. That is a documented, numbers-based rebuttal to the entire premise of the suspension. Proof that the attempt to silence him had produced the opposite of its intended effect. It's worth grounding the father of Eric and Don Jr. joke in a bit more real context, because the underlying pattern Kimmel is pointing to is genuinely documented rather than simply inherited reputation. Both Trump sons have built out extensive business operations that expanded substantially during their father's second term, including consulting arrangements, real estate ventures, and cryptocurrency projects that have drawn sustained scrutiny from ethics watchdogs precisely because of how closely they intersect with their father's official position. Don Jr. in particular has become a prominent public figure in his own right through his podcast Triggered, using that platform to amplify combative, often legally aggressive rhetoric toward journalists and critics. The same instinct for confrontation over engagement that Kimmel's joke was needling in the first place. None of this requires exaggeration or invention. It is simply the observable, public conduct of two men who occupy an unusually visible role in American political and business life, specifically because of their father's office. And comedians going after that overlap is about as old and as legitimate a tradition in American political satire as exists.
Bombing children daily and is furious that there is now almost a peace deal. Thankfully, their fury at Trump's audacity to almost make peace is being made known to the American people by their highly funded and most loyal foreign agents. Supporters and paid social media personalities and Fox News host.
More from Marjorie Taylor Greene here, saying, congratulations, you've now lost the war. You got the United States into this catastrophic and unlawful war with Netanyahu, and now you want to gloat and you want us to commend you? Well, we're not going to do that, as you've destroyed the lives of so many Americans. Take a listen to this video message from Marjorie Taylor Greene. Let's play this clip.
In conclusion, congratulations to all for almost achieving peace to the war that is not a war, spending hundreds of billions of U.S. tax dollars again for another foreign war after we voted no. Special mention goes to the real insiders who have gamed the market with massive profits from inside information, and shout out to the friends and family landing those highly coveted government contracts. This, apparently, is what winning looks like.
She also calls out Donald Trump for this reckless, idiotic, stupid war that the United States got in with Netanyahu. Here, play this clip.
It's been incredible that we beat Iran dozens of times and nearly made peace almost 40 times. It's only cost upwards of $50 billion, probably more, part of which was spent bombing a children's school, by the way.
Marjorie Taylor Greene also reposted the video of Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, where she called out Donald Trump for recklessly, maliciously picking fights, oddly picking these fights with American allies and siding with American enemies. Marjorie Taylor Greene writes, I believe Giorgia Meloni. She's great. Trump lies constantly. I mean, she's been out there going after Donald Trump day in, day out. Right now, Marjorie Taylor Greene leading the movement of having people leave MAGA, leave Donald Trump for good. In response to House Republicans posting the following message, your tax dollars should serve you, not criminals, not fraudsters, not foreign nationals. Marjorie Taylor Greene posts, not foreign countries, not foreign wars, not foreign people, American only. She also reposts this message from Ron Paul. Post-war, the truth is starting to come out on the American side. The president, who formerly was in no rush and didn't need the Strait of Hormuz, now says oil reserves are just 4 weeks away from empty, and he's trying to avoid economic catastrophe by signing the Memorandum of Understanding. From start to finish, this was all unnecessary and has caused nothing but harm for America. Then she posted a video with a similar message there. Now, Others are joining Marjorie Taylor Greene and also taking her side as well. For example, you had Megyn Kelly recently come out, and she said that Donald Trump, of course, bullied Marjorie Taylor Greene because she wanted the Epstein files out, and as a result, Donald Trump banned her from the MAGA movement. Listen to what Megyn Kelly says here. Play this.
She is on tour around the world and still makes it to his games on Sundays. He's in the middle of a football season. He's flying to Buenos Aires. They're making it very hard for every other couple that's in a long-distance relationship right now. Oh, you can't make it to my mom's house for Thanksgiving this year? Travis flew to Singapore for Taylor. On the other side of humanity's coin, we have Donald Trump Jr., who was in court again this morning. There he is. You hear the protesters chanting, crime family, and that is basically what these people are, a crime family, a very dumb crime family, the Gambozos, if you will, and Don Jr., he's so embarrassing. He's on the stand, he's testifying in this $250 million fraud trial, and he has to compliment, he said his father is an artist with real estate. Yeah, he's an artist. He's Vincent Van Gogh to jail with real estate is what he is. He also boasted that his dad is the father.
If you're finding this history as sharp as we do, hit that like button right now and subscribe to USA Press, because this is exactly the kind of full context, receipts first breakdown we live for, tracing a real decade-long feud rather than chasing whatever clip happens to be trending. Share this with someone who only knows the surface-level version of this story. Now let's talk about the White House Correspondents' Dinner moment, because this is where Kimmel delivered the joke that would trigger the most serious institutional retaliation of his entire career. In the days before the actual 2026 Correspondents' Dinner, an event that, for the first time in years, did not feature a professional comedian delivering the traditional presidential roast. Kimmel staged his own version of the event on his show. He complimented the black tie attire of his fictional guests with a line referencing the Epstein files. I haven't seen this much black since every page of the Epstein files. He turned to a Trump stand-in and joked, "If we bruise your ego, it will only make your hands look less disgusting." He compared Trump's messianic self-regard to literal religious imagery. I get why you think you're Jesus. Every time he walks in a room, people say, "Christ, he's back." And then, addressing Melania Trump directly, he delivered the line that would dominate headlines for weeks and trigger an entirely separate institutional crisis. "You have a glow like an expectant widow." That joke, sharp, specific, aimed at the visible age gap between the president and first lady rather than at anything remotely approaching a threat, became the pretext for one of the most alarming regulatory actions of the entire second Trump term. It's worth explaining exactly why the actual Correspondents' Dinner didn't feature a professional comedian that year, because the absence itself is part of the story. The White House Correspondents Association, reportedly wary of provoking exactly the kind of institutional backlash that had already hit Kimmel and Colbert, opted for a mentalist rather than a comic. A remarkable, almost unprecedented capitulation for an event whose entire historical purpose has been built around a comedian roasting the sitting president to his face as a demonstration of a free press. Willingness to speak truth to power without fear of retribution. Kimmel staging his own version of the dinner on his own show was, in that light, not simply an act of comedy, but an act of institutional defiance. A direct statement that if the official event was too frightened to include the tradition, he would simply do it himself, on his own platform, under his own terms. Just days after that broadcast, a shooting at the actual White House Correspondents' Dinner shut the event down entirely. Trump's allies, led publicly by Melania Trump herself.
The deal that we had in the first place, and had worked for a long stretch of time before the United States pulled out of it. So I'm hopeful that bombing stops and ordinary people are no longer suffering as a consequence of the war. I think in retrospect, it's a reminder that on a lot of difficult foreign policy problems, the notion that we can just bully our way or bomb our way to solutions may sometimes seem appealing, but the fact of the matter is that taking the time to explore diplomacy and exhaust the possibilities of coming up with deals that don't solve 100% of the problem, but solve 80, 90% of the problem, while avoiding the necessity of going to war. You'd think we would have learned that lesson by now, but it seems like every so often we have to relearn that lesson again.
You can see.
And now MAGAs are also preparing for the midterms. And so what they're trying to do right now is things could not be worse off in the United States. They're just trying to scare people. And they're trying to do the name calling and the usual MAGA tricks that we've been warning you about. So this is MAGA Republican Congresswoman Lisa McClain. Here's what she has to say. Let's play it.
Resonating with the American people. What do you need to do to ensure you don't lose the majority in the House? What is the most important messaging you need to convey to voters coming up to the midterms?
Yeah, this is going to be a contrast for America. It's going to be a contrast election between common sense and crazy. Republicans were common sense. I think males should go in male locker rooms, females should go in female locker rooms. I actually think we should punish the criminal and take care of the victim. The other side is absolutely crazy, and that is what we need to focus on, common sense versus crazy. Also,
or here's what MAGA Republican Senator Katie Britt has to say. Let's play this clip right here.
And we're not going to let Democrats who are now run by anti-socialists, literally, I mean, they're run, excuse me, Maria, they are run by anti-Semitic socialists. And we're not going to let those people win the day.
Yeah.
And so you see the fear mongering and the tactics that they use. Back to Pete Hegseth for a second. And Pete Hegseth is being asked a very basic question, which is, so I'm just curious, are we going to put ground troops to get this nuclear material? What is the plan? What is this deal really about? Watch what Hegseth says right here. Let's play it.
It's an important point for those who are members of the U.S. military to understand whether you are saying ground troops would be involved in cleaning up nuclear dust.
That you're saying that you're trying to put words in my mouth to create a headline. What I'm saying is we have plans. No, we have plans for everything. And should the president need a compel option, we have compel options and many different types of compel options. But right now we've set the conditions for 60 days to ensure that material is downblended, destroyed, or removed.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin, Putin, is putting out that Putin and Trump
drew a direct and evidence-free line between Kimmel's joke and the violence, despite there being no connection whatsoever between a comedy, bit about an age gap, and an act of gun violence at an unrelated event days later. The fallout was immediate and severe. The FCC, under Trump-appointed chairman Brendan Carr, ordered ABC's owned television stations into an accelerated license renewal review, a bureaucratic mechanism that industry observers widely understood as retaliation dressed up in regulatory language. Carr and his defenders insisted the timing had nothing to do with displeasing their Oval Office master, in the words of one industry trade publication's own skeptical framing of that claim. This was not a minor procedural footnote. Broadcast licenses are the literal legal foundation that allows a television station to operate at all, and threatening that foundation over a joke represents exactly the kind of government overreach that free press advocates across the political spectrum immediately flagged as a genuine First Amendment concern. It's worth situating the ABC license threat inside the exact same broader pattern we documented in our previous report on Stephen Colbert's cancellation, because the mechanics are structurally identical, even though the specific companies and regulatory levers differ. In Colbert's case, it was Paramount facing a pending merger approval that required sign-off from a Trump-aligned FCC. In Kimmel's case, it is Disney's ABC facing an accelerated license renewal review from that same FCC, under that same chairman, following that same basic pattern. A comedian criticizes Trump or his family, and within days, the exact regulatory body with life or death authority over that comedian's network finds a new, urgent reason to scrutinize the network's ability to keep broadcasting at all. Two different networks, two different comedians, two different specific triggers, and the exact same underlying mechanism of federal regulatory leverage being deployed in the immediate aftermath of criticism the president personally found objectionable.
Straight reform moves. They're getting a $300 million payoff, which we Democrats are not going to vote for. No one should vote for it. This money should be used at home where it's needed to reduce people's costs, not as a payoff to the Iranians. He still has his missiles. The Iranians still have their missiles. The oil prices and gas prices will stay higher for a long time. Basically, Iran got just about everything it wanted, and we got nothing.
Trump's defenders argue it would not be the US taxpayer money and would be conditional, despite the fact that those same people likely lost their mind over the deal that Obama negotiated, which wasn't $300 billion, by the way, but it allowed Iran access to their own frozen funds. But don't just take it from me, right? What about, say, Fox News?
With that said, this MOU appears to be, just from the text, a disaster that does not achieve any of the actual signal goals that were set by the administration at the beginning. There were effectively 5 goals that were set by the administration at the beginning. One was ending the nuclear program, not just nuclear weapons, no nuclear enrichment, zero enrichment. That is not in the deal. Ballistic missiles ended. That is not in the deal. And the president today suggested that ballistic missiles should actually continue to be held by the Iranians because the Saudis, our allies, also hold ballistic missiles. Then you have the support of terrorism. That is not part of the deal. Anything that looks like an attempt to end terrorism. A permanent opening of the Strait of Hormuz toll-free. Not only is that not in the deal appears to have a provision allowing Iran and Oman to attempt to toll the Strait after 60 days. And then finally, the idea that Iran would receive some sort of sanctions relief after all of those things happen. We are already seeing from day one relief in their ability to ship oil out of Iran. In my opinion, the Vice President of the United States, the chief negotiator on this particular project, has not well served the president.
Or maybe even from a retired military general on Fox News.
I want to believe that. But if you have a reliable, high-level administration source saying, we're not going to get rid of the dust, we're going to downblend it, that leaves them with enrichment.
The vice president just contradicted that.
And we're not going to take their centrifuges, and they're not going to take centrifuges out, and they're not going to take the cascades out, which means you can have weapons grade. And there's going to be a moratorium in terms of you can't have a nuclear deal for 10, 20 years, similar to the JCPOA. And the funding is real. There's a $300 billion investment fund. Who cares where the money comes from? If it doesn't come from the United States, I get that. Of course it shouldn't. But it shouldn't come from anybody. I mean, when we recovered Germany and Japan, the Nazis weren't in charge. The Japanese imperialists weren't in charge. Here, the Iranians are in charge. The killers and thugs are still in charge. We don't give them that money because what are they going to do with it? They're going to recover everything we've taken away from them. Who cares whether it's coming from the Arabs, from the Qataris, or whatever? They don't get it. They shouldn't get any of it. That's just the reality of it. They're going to take that money and recover everything. And you know that, Sean. You know that you can't trust these people.
I don't trust the Iranians. I'm a trust but verify guy. But I heard the vice president say they don't get anything unless they do those things. They get nothing until they do something. It's not our money. And they never signed off, he said, on any deal for Qatar to give them a penny. Now, he said they would open the door if Arab countries want to invest down the road, but that's if they start fulfilling the promises that they're talking about having committed to. Listen.
Now, here's where we come back to the family angle, because Trump's own public statements about late-night hosts reveal a pattern worth examining closely. When Stephen Colbert's show was cancelled in the summer of 2025, a story we've covered extensively on this channel, Trump celebrated on Truth Social, writing that he loved that Colbert got fired. His talent was even less than his ratings. I hear Jimmy Kimmel is next, has even less talent than Colbert. Notice what's happening in that sentence. Trump is not simply celebrating one cancellation, he is publicly predicting, and by clear implication rooting for, Kimmel's job to be next on the chopping block. This is the same rhetorical pattern we've documented across Rosie O'Donnell, across Whoopi Goldberg, across Sunny Hostin. A president who does not simply disagree with criticism, but actively campaigns, using the platform of the presidency itself for his critics to lose their livelihoods. It's worth including one more piece of material from this stretch, because it shows Kimmel taking his fight directly into the belly of his own corporate parent, rather than only aiming it outward at Trump. At Disney's own 2026 Upfront presentation, the annual event where networks pitch advertisers on the coming season's programming, Kimmel opened by acknowledging the surreal position he was in. "I've been through so much bullshit this year," he told the assembled advertising executives, a rare moment of a network talent openly referencing his own near cancellation in front of the very corporate audience whose ad dollars keep his show funded. New Disney CEO Josh D'Amaro, taking the stage in the same presentation, struck a tone of both change and continuity, and the fact that Kimmel remained a featured part of that presentation at all, rather than being quietly sidelined, suggested that despite the FCC pressure and the suspension, Disney's own leadership had, at least for the moment, chosen not to fold in the way Paramount had with Colbert. Let's move forward to more recent material, because Kimmel's targeting of the Trump family's business dealings and public conduct has only intensified as 2026 has progressed. In May, during the middle of Trump's ongoing White House ballroom construction saga, the $400 million project we've covered in depth on this channel, built by demolishing the historic East Wing. Kimmel opened a monologue with characteristic bluntness. There is just so much lying and stealing and grifting and cheating in the news today. I don't even know where to begin. So we might as well start with the most important issue we face as Americans, and that is the fact that we don't have a ballroom at the White House. After playing a clip of Trump discussing the ballroom's construction, Kimmel deadpanned. Let me think about that for a second.
You know what, General? I think that Reagan had the best line of all. Trust but verify. We'll know very quickly. If they're serious, we'll know. If they're not, I would imagine the military option is back on, because last week they got hit hard, not once, but twice. So,
you see, Rupert Murdoch's media empire has been vital for Trump over the years. They coddle him at almost every turn. They enable him, so I'm not going to give them a pat on the back for realizing that he sold them a lie. Also, Trump relies on them giving him oxygen, but when those very outlets are calling the deal weak, you know it's bad. Especially when the majority of Americans were against the conflict in the first place and have witnessed firsthand the repercussions here at home. Trump spent years saying that Obama's Iran deal was the worst deal in history. He called it weak, said it empowered Iran. Now Trump has a deal that critics say lifts pressure, offers economic relief, and leaves nuclear questions unresolved, and very much depends on future negotiations with Iran. That's a nightmare for a man who spends every waking moment trying to convince people that he is a better president than Obama, and also in better shape.
Of it, like, oh my, look at this money he's giving us. He tried to bribe his way out. I didn't do that. Nobody mentions that. 1.7 billion and hundreds of millions of dollars. They tried to bribe their way out of it. And you know what the Iranians did? They laughed at Obama and they said he's a stupid son of a bitch. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
The exhibits here focus not just on policies, but on the shared values that make democracy possible. A belief in the intrinsic dignity and worth of all people, and that no one is above the law or beneath its protection. A belief in checks and balances in our government and an accountability that comes with it, an independent judiciary and a robust free press. A belief that our military and law enforcement owe allegiance not to any president or political party, but to the people and our Constitution. A belief in the peaceful transfer of power after the people have spoken in fair and free elections, recognizing that in a large, complicated society like ours, no group or faction gets its way 100% of the time. And a belief that qualities of character, honesty, integrity, kindness, compassion, a sense of duty and honor, those things matter in our public dealings, just as they do in our private lives. These are not these are the values and traditions I believe in. And they are not Republican or Democratic values. They're American values we can all share, regardless of party. Values every president here today, as different as we are, has tried our best to uphold. Values that John McCain and Mitt Romney believed in no less than I did. It is our greatest inheritance, the story of America at its best, because it reflects a basic faith in the decency of our fellow citizens.
How does the roof go down into the basement? Before landing his closer, I'm starting to get the idea Blob the Builder doesn't know much about construction either. A reference to the children's cartoon character Bob the Builder reworked into a jab at both Trump's competence and his physical appearance in one compact joke. The audience reaction, according to social media commentary at the time, ranged from delighted laughter to genuine relief. One commenter wrote simply, "Thanks! I needed a good laugh in this time of lunacy," capturing something real about the function Kimmel's monologues have come to serve for a significant slice of his audience. Kimmel's material around the 4th of July celebrations this year followed the exact same pattern of connecting Trump's grandiosity to his own documented history. After Trump posted an elaborate Truth Social announcement promising the most spectacular Trump rollie of them all for the nation's 250th birthday, complete with what he called the largest fireworks show in history, Kimmel read the post to his audience and delivered a single devastating line. He's going to burn down the White House, isn't he? The joke works because it is not hyperbole. It is a direct callback to Trump's own actual demolition of the East Wing just months earlier, reframed as a prediction about what excessive celebration combined with actual explosives might produce. And in a separate monologue responding to Trump's public complaints about musical artists dropping out of his Freedom 250 concert lineup, Trump had written that he only wanted to be surrounded by happy people, smart people, successful people, and people that know how to win. Kimmel turned the joke directly onto Melania, showing a photograph of the First Lady and describing it dryly as this photograph of his wife pictured at their evening grimace. That is a pattern worth naming explicitly. Kimmel consistently finds his sharpest material not in abstract policy criticism, but in the specific, observable details of the Trump family's public presentation. The ballroom, the fireworks, the family photographs, the sons who inherited the litigiousness their father built an empire on. It's worth grounding the ballroom material in a bit more hard context too, because Kimmel's jokes about construction competence sit on top of a genuinely enormous, genuinely controversial public expenditure. The White House ballroom project has been estimated at roughly $400 million, funded through a mix of private donations and, according to critics, less transparent channels, and it required the demolition of the historic East Wing.
Play this clip.
On domestic issues. It's almost like Trump found it's really hard to have an effect on those issues and gave up and said, like, foreign policy is one area in which a commander-in-chief can make a real difference, which is true. So I'm just going to focus on that. You know, it's like that little soundbite that leaked over his Easter lunch that he had that wasn't supposed to be put online, but it was for about 15 minutes. And then the White House realized and they pulled it down.
What was that?
He said in that soundbite, there's really not much the federal government can do to like change life at the local level. They can't really change crime or help you with health insurance, medical care, or like those small issues that actually affect your life on a day-to-day basis. That's really more local government. And it was a very controversial statement because he made a bunch of promises that he would help people in those lanes, but it also isn't entirely untrue. And you can hear it almost as a justification for his foreign adventurism. Like, this is annoying. You know, I actually kind of can't get these illegals out because all these sanctuary cities are protecting them. And I haven't found an effective way around them. I've tried to do cleanup in some cities, but most won't let me in when it comes to crime. So what am I really supposed to do? Healthcare's too big to take on. I can't make many changes there because I don't have a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, nor do I have even 51 Republicans who would vote to change the rules to get rid of the filibuster if I wanted that. I know there are a lot of Republicans who are like, get rid of the filibuster. You don't have the votes to do it. You have, some 5 Republicans who won't vote for it, and no Dems are going to vote for it. So you at least need 51 senators to vote to overturn the protocol that requires a 60-vote majority to get a vote on legislation. So I think he was feeling, what else can I do? All I have is these executive orders. I issued all the ones I was interested in at the beginning of the presidency back in February of 25. So what else can I do? Oh, here's something fun. And I think he loves the military toys that he discovered with the Maduro raid.
And let's, of course, remember what Marjorie Taylor Greene said just a few months back, where she referred to Donald Trump and his regime as, quote, sick fucking liars. That's how she now refers to Donald Trump consistently. The Trump administration actually asked in a poll how many casualties voters are willing to accept in a war with Iran. How about 0, you sick fucking liars? We voted for America first, not not these wars, and 0 wars, she says. Also, she went on News Nation and she said that Americans are tired of endless wars, empty promises, and Washington propaganda. Here's what she said here. Play this clip.
The Middle East and the world, are they not safer with a non-nuclear Iran moving forward?
Well, you know, it's very interesting to me.
Is the kind of event that would, under almost any other circumstance, dominate every single news cycle in the country for a week straight. Khamenei had led Iran since 1989, making him one of the longest-serving heads of state anywhere in the world, and his death introduces a genuinely unpredictable succession dynamic into an already volatile conflict. Precisely the kind of moment when regional security analysts warned that unpredictable escalation becomes most likely. That this event is unfolding at the exact same moment, Trump is standing at a NATO summit describing the entire American military campaign as not even a war, tells you something important about how disconnected the administration's public rhetoric has become from the actual scale of what is happening on the ground. And it is precisely the kind of gap between spectacle and substance that Kimmel has built an entire year of monologues around identifying. Here is the deeper truth sitting underneath this entire Kimmel saga, and it connects directly to every other feud we've covered on this channel. Chris Rock, Trevor Noah, Whoopi Goldberg, Sonny Hostin, Stephen Colbert. Jimmy Kimmel did not become one of this administration's most consistent targets by inventing material out of thin air. He became a target by paying close, careful attention to Trump's own documented public record. The hush money payment, the felony convictions, the ballroom demolition, the 4th of July spectacle, the sons who learned to reach for lawyers before arguments, and simply narrating it back to millions of viewers with a comedian's timing. That is precisely why the FCC felt compelled to threaten his network's broadcast license over a single joke about the First Lady's expression. Not because the joke itself was uniquely devastating, but because Kimmel had spent years building the credibility and the audience trust that made each individual joke land with the weight of an entire body of accurate, well-sourced criticism behind it. This is USA Press. If tonight's deep dive connected pieces of the real Kimmel-Trump family history you hadn't seen laid out together before, hit that like button right now. It costs you 1 second, and it puts this reporting in front of thousands more people who need the full picture, especially given how much noise and fabricated clickbait circulates around this exact rivalry compared to the actual, well-documented material we've walked through tonight. Subscribe to USA Press and turn on notifications, because between the ongoing FCC license fight, the Iran escalation, and whatever fresh material comes out of Kimmel's next monologue, this story is nowhere close to finished. Drop a comment and tell us. Was the $130,000 he wanted me to do it for nothing line, or Blob the Builder, the single sharpest thing Jimmy Kimmel has said about this administration? And do you think the FCC's license review against ABC will ever actually succeed, or is it simply designed to hang over the network indefinitely as a warning to everyone else? We want to hear where you land. Stay sharp, stay informed, and remember, you cannot cease and desist your way out of documented public record.